morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Joint Nelson Tasman Regional Transport Committee. And I'll ask Dwayne to do the opening karakia, please.
Kia ora. Hello. Tuia kia rautou, find within. Tuia ki waho, find beyond. Tuia tātou te tangata, find us the people. Ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, to the purpose of our meeting. Ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, to the purpose of the day. Mauri ora, kia tātou katoa. Breathe life into all of us.
Thank you, Dwayne. Do we have any apologies for today's meeting? We have one from Councillor Ellis. Any other apologies? Someone like to move that the apology be accepted? Councillor Dowler, seconded Councillor O'Neill-Stevens. All those in favour will say aye. Against, resolution is carried. Just some housekeeping. I don't think we have now. Have we got someone on Zoom? If you're on Zoom, just remember microphones muted unless you're speaking and hands up for questions. And soon attendees to turn off camera and microphone during breaks or not when not speaking. For the rest of us, the meeting is being recorded and will be available on Council's YouTube channel if relevant. And for those of you who haven't been before, the toilets are out to the left, and the emergency procedure is that we exit the building via the nearest exit and assemble at the rear of the Amadillo's building and wait for the emergency services. Unless it's a earthquake, we would drop cover and hold the sounds and warning alarms and audio come over the system anyway. And just be aware that the media are present and may be filming part or all of this meeting. Right, no one registered for the public forum. Correct, Eli? So with that, we can move on to declarations of interest. None. No late items. No. Confirmation of the minutes of the Joint Nelson Tasman Regional Transport Committee meeting held on Monday, 11th of December 2023 be confirmed a true and correct record of the meeting. Someone happy to move that? Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour will say aye. Against, resolution is carried. We'll move to reports. I say welcome, Emma, and I did miss welcoming our new CEO, Leonie, so welcome, ladies, to this meeting. And we'll move to the first report, which is a public transport update. Margaret and Alec. And I haven't got the page number, but I think it's reasonably early. Page 4. Announcements.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the report is to update you on a number of public transport matters and proposed initiatives, and I will take the report as read. However, in a moment, I'll take a little time to summarise it and provide some relevant commentary that has come to light since the report was written. But before I would do that, I'd like to just acknowledge Madeline, who's sitting to my right, who is attending today her last RTC meeting. Madeline, our public transport advisor, is leaving us on Friday. And I know that she was involved from the beginning of the, well, not from the beginning, but from very close to the launch of the new contract and has done a great deal of work in the last 8 months. So farewell to Madeline. We have advertised and in fact recruited a replacement for Madeline who will be commencing full-time employment for both councils. It's a jointly funded position in April. So on to the report. Firstly, patronage. So we did anticipate and experience a drop in patronage in December and over the Christmas holidays. It's not unexpected. However, patronage has come back very strongly in January and February. The return to work and school has seen many of our services full to capacity, and we have had to provide additional overflow buses on a number of our routes or our services. The main one is Route 1, which is the service between Nelson and Richmond via Waimea Road, and it is at capacity around 8 a.m. and again at about 3 p.m, so school in and out time. We have carried out a lot of publicity explaining that the buses are full and that overflow buses will follow. And we are encouraging people to use the services either side of that peak where there is plenty of capacity where possible. 726, for example, is not full. The cost of the overflow buses is $520 plus GST a day. So it's we're monitoring it really closely as to how much longer we will need to run those. Route 2, which is between Nelson and Richmond via the coastal route to Tahunanui, has also experienced moments where it's at full capacity. Particularly in the afternoon, when the bus comes through Stoke and on to Nayland College, the bus has been full. Now, this service is very attractive to students. Anybody that's under 12 or looks like they're under 12 travels for free at the moment, or if they're paying a student fare, it's $1. And that is a subsidised fare, but it's cheaper than the commercial school services that are run by a third party. So, of course, the e-bus is an attractive option. Now, additional overflow buses for that route have been considered by staff, but they are costly. I attended a forum of public transport officers from around the country earlier this week, and we discussed capacity issues around New Zealand, and there were many examples of what we're experiencing. So there's a phenomenon that in the transport world is known as March madness, and we seem to be experiencing it early, and that is that our networks are very busy at this time of the year as people return to work and school. It does tend to settle down, and we're watching for that. As particularly with this after school peak, I think as after school activities kick in, sports practice and so on, we're hoping that there'll be a bit of a dispersion of demand for that 3 p.m. service. So at this stage, we're not considering an extra bus on the Nayland route, the Tahunanui route, which is Route 1, but we will continue to monitor it, and we'll look at it again when we review the entire service in August this year. So on to revenue. In the report, item 3.3 shows a graph of actual ticket revenue against forecast ticket revenue. I just need a minor correction there. The report reads it's actual ticket revenue against budget, but it's not. It's against forecast ticket revenue, and there is a difference, which I'll come back to in a moment. You can see that the gap is closing. The initial gap was there between forecast ticket revenue and actual revenue because we started the service a month later than was originally planned. So there was no July revenue under this contract. So what we're seeing is a really encouraging trend. The cumulative totals, the gap is getting smaller. However, the graph does only show ticket revenue and doesn't reflect the entire public transport budget. And that is a complex budget, and it's made up of many moving parts, aside from the money that we're paying our contracted service provider, SBL Group Limited. So we are 6 months into that contract. We have experienced some unanticipated costs, and we have now received all the invoices for the initial setup. Our forecast for the full financial year predicts a shortfall in operational budget. Now, a more detailed report will be brought to the next RTC meeting on this matter. It will outline what those overruns are, the reasons for them, and the proposed steps to address it. We have commenced the process of a cost scope adjustment with our funding partners, Waka Kotahi, for consideration. Item 3.4 outlines in the report the announcements by central government to cease the funding for the Community Connect subsidies from the 30th of April. Included in the report is a table showing you what that will do to our fares. Essentially, it's a reversion back to our original fare policy. Moving on, in the report, there are 2 initiatives that this committee asked officers to investigate. The first was for us to consider allowing larger dogs outside of containers onto buses. And today we seek your approval to commence a 12-week trial under the terms and conditions that are attached to the report as attachment 1. The trial and the terms and conditions are very much based on work done by Auckland Transport last year. The second initiative we're proposing today is to introduce an accessibility concession, essentially free travel on buses, to total mobility card holders and their support persons, as described in the report. And the third initiative being proposed today arises from previous concern about the low uptake of the Stoke on-demand service. With this service, we have carried out a survey and a number of communication initiatives are planned to increase awareness of that service and educate people on how to use the app. But in addition, today we are proposing a slight extension to the boundary of that service, which will enable trips to and from Stoke to the Mitre 10 and new soon to be opened Junction retail outlets. That is the report. Of course, I am happy to take any questions that you have on these proposals or other information in the report. Thank you.
I think we do have some questions. Yes, Bill.
Firstly, can I thank Madeline for her work? The implementation of the new e-bus service is one of the most important transport changes that's occurred in Nelson for a long time. The full team deserve credit. We as elected members can't tell who does what, but collectively as a team, you should be proud of being that. And thank you very much for your service. Can I just commend the team on the initiative around responding to our request on the mobility concession and indicate strong support for that initiative coming into effect, and also for the new dog trial to be tried through from March through to June. Obviously, we'll have some discussion, but I want to indicate strong support for that. The one area of, or two areas of question I have, firstly is with respect to Stoke on demand. I note, and I'm really pleased with the way in which you've responded to the very high demand on Route 1. I think that what that reinforces for us as public transport operators is that when you provide a frequency of service and a volume, you can really get public pickup, and that's hugely encouraging. And it's great that we've been able to get those extra buses to meet the overflow. My question is the opposite on Stoke on demand, and that is that we're only doing 10 Ks per day of runs. When I see that we're having to pay for 50K per day, and I see that while we're making progress, there's a shortfall in the budget. Are we sure that the Stoke on demand is a viable service? In other words, this is not to question, the overall big work program here is we're making great lifts in the number of people that are using the buses. Overall, we're looking at about a 70 or 80% increase. Whenever you make these big changes, you don't know how completely they're going to land. And we're getting high demand, as you've indicated, from the students and the like. I'm just worried about how much the Stoke on demand service is costing vis-a-vis its level of use. What you're proposing to do is to expand the area and to throw a bit more publicity at it. Are we sure it is the right answer? Some of the feedback I've got from Stoke is that now you have Route 2 going down through Neyland. We're actually meeting part of that need. And there might be a serious question about whether actually Stoke on demand. The other thing, of course, is that many of our mobility customers have access to subsidies for taxi services and other providers, and whether we've got that model right. So has the option of Stoke on demand discontinuing as a saving to meet some of the shortfall and to meet some of the areas where we've got higher demand being considered?
Thank you. Through the chair. The August review of the service in its entirety, 1 year post commencement, is, I think, the place we had intended to have the conversation and make the decision about the future of the Stoke on demand service. So withdrawal of it at this stage has not been considered. Before we considered that, we thought we'd tweak it and see if we could increase the patronage. I will say historically, the Stoke service, when we ran prior to this contract, the Stoke loops, initially they were not well patronised and we did withdraw them. And there was a very loud response from the Stoke community that hadn't been using the buses about that. But some of the users were, there used to be a term used in transport called transport disadvantaged. So the service was really there to meet a social need, to get those people from their place of residence into Stoke where they could do their business transactions, supermarket shopping, visit other places of business. So we reinstated the Stoke loop on a limited basis, which was between 9 and 3 on weekdays only. And it was largely used by Super Gold card holders. So there was a response from the previous council to recognise the need of those transport disadvantaged and reinstate the Stoke loops. When the new contract was put together and the bus review was taken out, it was felt that a more efficient way, rather than three continuous driving around Stoke with largely empty small buses, would be to run an on-demand service. So this is a new thing. We didn't know how it was going to go, and I think officers believe that 12 months will give us enough time to really make a good informed decision about its future. But in the interim, between now and when that 12 months is up, we want to do as much as we can to increase its usage. But at this stage, withdrawal hasn't been considered.
How much is the Stoke On Demand costing per month?
I don't have that figure in front of me, Your Worship. Sorry, I'll have to come back to you on it.
Okay. I think the message that the Transport Committee should provide to the broader community on the Stoke On Demand is use it or lose it. That is, I do not think we can justify either ratepayer money or taxpayer money continuing to fund a service that just has such low levels of usage. And so in our messaging, happy to do a bit more tweaks to see if we can get it to work. But the public need to be aware that with the very low level of usage, I don't think we can maintain it when we do the substantive review in August with a very low level of patronage. But if officers could circulate a note to us as per what is the cost per month of the Stoke On Demand service, that would be helpful as well. My other line of questioning was, we've all noted the very substantive development at the junction. I note that the report indicates the Stoke On Demand service linking there. Why is it not possible for the Route 2 bus to provide a bus stop facility that would work well for that junction, that over the next 3 or 4 months is going to have a large amount of activity and be quite a hub with the supermarket and 6 new retail stores on that side? Why have we not been able to get public transport to link in with the new developments at the junction?
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Through the chair, I have met with developers on site at the junction, and we have carried some analysis out of bus movements within that site. The short answer is the turning movements aren't possible under the current layout. The buses are too big to be able to turn in that space without changes to the road layout. The Cadillac Way is actually also a private road, and the weight of our buses would most probably significantly damage that road at this stage without some investment in pavement rehabilitation. But right now, for the bus to go into the junction would, even if it could, which it can't, wreak havoc with the Route 2 timetable. There is absolutely no fat in the system of that timetable at the moment, and it means that the bus wouldn't be adhering to its existing timetable, which is already under pressure.
Where is the closest bus stop to the junction on the current route when it comes off Nayland Road onto Quarantine?
The closest bus stop to the junction on Nayland Road is opposite Galway Street, which is just at the top of the overbridge rise. And then the next one is round by Hazel Way on State Highway 6, Sandersbrook Drive. So that one could have good pedestrian access because you can come down the shared path, and when the new supermarket opens, to go through the underpass under the expressway. So it's not close. It is something we've indicated to the developers that we are keen to talk to them about getting buses through there in the future, but it is not in any budget at the moment to change the routes, the timetable, therefore the cost of the service, nor carry out the infrastructure work required.
It just seems to me that accept those reasons and those complexities, and it's not absolutely necessary for the e-bus to go into the junction. But it does seem odd that the 2 bus stops we have are a substantive distance from it. I'd be interested in our council officers just doing a bit more work around what are the options of locating a bus stop, even if it is on the current route, closer to where the junction is. I just think in terms of our broader objective of trying to increase patronage, both for those that work at the junction, where my indications is there'll be a workforce there of over 200 people, as well as customers. I just think it's one of the next steps of things that we need to do to improve. So if we could get some more work done in that space, not expecting it overnight, may feed into the broader review, understand the complexities around the route too. Quite happy to accept we can't get the buses into the junction, but it is my view that we should be able to find a bus stop that's closer to the junction. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Councillor Dowler.
Well, just a comment, really. Prior to Christmas, I actually had a meeting in Nelson. So I jumped on the bus out at Tasman and came into here, did some work in here, and then I jumped on the bus and went into Nelson. I went through the hospital route and counted the patrons on there and off and saw what happened. It was an enlightening trip from Tasman to here, all the Waka people on board. Went in there, did the meeting, and then I came out and I deliberately caught the Tahuna bus on the way out. It was very interesting when we came past the schools. You pull in, bus stop. Sometimes you have 10 or 11 children getting on board the bus, and you go down 2 bus stops, and those 10 or 11 kids would get off. So they were actually taking the bus just for the 300 or 400 metres down the road instead of walking. And then there was an influx, and it was very interesting. By the time we got out here, I think we're about 4 minutes late. It was no big deal. It was just the fact of the time they got their scooters and threw them in the rack, and then someone had one at the bottom and they had to pull them all out to get it out. It was really good to sit and watch. And I really, really suggest that people take the opportunity to actually get on the bus one day and go in and come out and have a look and just see how it all works. It's really good. And then I jumped on the bus and went back to Tasman and jumped in my car and went home again with a whole heap of Waka people. Amazing when you hop on a bus in the morning and there's a whole heap of them sitting down the back. Oh, what are you doing on here? What's the council doing on the bus? Don't they pay you guys enough anymore? And all this rubbish to see. So I stopped in the middle of the aisle and I just said, actually, I'm here because we've had a lot of complaints about the old people on this bus route from Waka to Richmond on this particular day during the week. So I thought I'd come along and see how you guys behaved myself. Well, you could have heard a pin drop. They didn't know what to say. And then I burst out laughing and said, just having you on. And of course, then the conversation went and how great the service was and what they were doing and how often they come across here for a lunch as a group and they go other places. And I was really happy. So yeah, I really do encourage people to do it. Today, I'm actually catching the bus back because I made a commitment to myself that every couple of months I'm going to use the bus to somewhere around the place just to see how it's all going.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Stephens.
Thanks, and thanks for that update. Just a quick question around the total mobility concession, and firstly, just incredibly grateful for the speed of turnaround from it being flagged last year to now actually having a policy change here ready to go. Just looking at 3.23 around the proposed commencement and allowing time for a minor change to the fares policy to be drafted and adopted. Is that intended to come back to us here at the RTC? Part 1. And part 2, from my read, I think what's in front of us is pretty clear as to what the change to the fares policy would be. It's spelt out pretty clearly as to whether or not we could just approve that minor amendment today. Save us a future report.
So through the chair, yes, it would require an approval from this committee to change the fares policy to reflect the total mobility or accessibility concession. Whether you do that today, I think my intention was to bring back that policy with its revisions highlighted as an attachment for a future meeting. So
Yeah, but my thinking was just to change to approves the introduction of an accessibility concession for total mobility card holders and subsequent amendments to our fares policy.
Mr. Chairman.
And I'll just clarify, so are you moving that as an amendment? Or?
I'm just testing the room.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm pretty supportive. It seems very logical and very supportive. So what it would do is we're being asked to approve the introduction. It seems a little bit bureaucratic for us to approve the introduction and then subsequently approve the fare change, because if you're going to introduce the concession, so there seems some efficiency in that. The only piece I would always like to know, and it's not because I'm opposed, it's just I want to know, what is the cost?
Through the chair, the cost to do this is a little unknown. The Bay of Plenty, which is the council we looked to model how they've done this, didn't report a big drop in their total mobility budget. So there wasn't a substitution of taxi rides for bus rides, but they did see more people who have accessibility challenges getting out and about on the buses they wouldn't have done in the past. The cost is, if the bus is riding half empty anyway and you're suddenly filling it up with people who would have otherwise been using a taxi or staying at home, there isn't really a cost. So that's the only, at peak times, you are going to be pushing the capacity boundaries further, and it's a lost fare, but at other times it's cost negligible. I don't know what the uptake of this is going to be. We have around 2,000 total mobility card holders or RideWise card holders at the moment. Some of them will still not be able to use a bus and will continue to just use taxis and wheelchair taxis. Others may use this, but the foregone fare revenue, I think, is going to be quite low. There is a cost to administration to get the letters out, to load the concessions onto the B cards of the total mobility card holders. That will require some resource from our administration team or our customer service team. Again, not a significant amount of money, a few thousand. But I don't know what the uptake of this will be. I don't have that crystal ball, but I do not expect it to be huge.
We should be able to, though, if we know that there are 2,000 concession holders, every time we give somebody a freebie, somebody does pay. I'm sorry. I don't want to live in a world where we believe we can give things away. We should be able to do well with 2,000 mobility card holders. That is approximately 3% of the population that we service. As a consequence, we would expect 3% of the passengers potentially, and the potential cost is. I just think to be blank on it is just not being upfront with our community that when we give concessions, there is a real cost.
Certainly, through the chair, I absolutely take your point. I think what I'm saying is the cost is foregone revenue, but it's foregone revenue for trips that may not have otherwise been taken.
But that is true of when we give a concession for young people, or we give a discounted rate for others. Every one of those, that may influence their decision as to whether they use the overall bus service. Now, my understanding of the overall bus service is it's a cost of about $5 million a year to ratepayers and to taxpayers. Have I got that about right? If I look at the Tasman District Council, Nelson City Council, the total service, and we're receiving a revenue of about 800 grand a year. These are substantive numbers. So I accept it's small, I'm supportive of it, but just on all of the concessions that we give or freebies we give, we should be upfront with our community about what the cost of providing that concession is. And if you run the argument that says that well, whenever we allow a person on the bus free, it doesn't cost anything because the bus is still running. I don't think that argument carries overall. You know, you've got a overall number of passenger usage per year that should be divided by that rough 5 million a year of the service to get an idea of what the cost is of providing it. So I'm supportive of Rohan's suggested amendment. So we're not bringing staff back with a further report, but just in the supplementary information, both in the cost on the Stoke on demand, it would also be used to have your best estimate, Mark. And I know it'll be crude and I know it's an estimate, but you should be able to give some idea of what we think the cost of the concession is. And just a note around to members of the Regional Transport Committee, please.
We can address it further when we come to the reason. Address it further when we come to the resolution, right? Councillor Williams. Who was next? Was it Councillor Courtney? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And through you to Marg and Madeline, thank you both for your presentation today. I've got a couple of questions. One relating to the alteration in fares for 12 5-year-olds and 18 to 13-year-olds. I'll come back to that. Looking at 13.5, you make a note here, reference that you could reduce patronage over the fare adjustments, and to what extent you're unknown at the moment. But then you go on to say there is no further guidance around the other public transport initiatives within the Climate Emergency Response Fund program at this stage. Therefore, any further funding of these initiatives will remain on hold until we receive direction from the new government. Marg, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you give me an outline of some of the new initiatives, some of the remaining initiatives that you would take up, please?
Through the chair, that quote came directly from the Waka Kotahi website. So I essentially am saying there is nothing else in the pipeline that I can comment on at this stage. And that's coming from central government. So we don't quite know what thoughts are on further public transport subsidies or reinstatement of any of the old ones. We just don't know at the moment.
Just the fact through you, Mr. Chair, that you were saying here the initiatives will remain on hold, and that sparked my curiosity to know just exactly what those initiatives were. But anyway, I can't be enlightened on that.
There were
Through the chair, Emma.
there were some additional things like vehicle kilometres travel reduction plans and so on that were included in part of the SURF funding, but they are all on hold.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney, do you have anything further?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Mr. Chair, I'd like to test the room, to use a phrase of our Nelson's Deputy Mayor, and see what appetite the Regional Transport Committee has to making representations to the Minister of Transport, that's the Honourable Simeon Brown, asking him to put a stay on his decision of December 2023 to changes to the program's funding through the Climate Emergency Response Fund, which includes, as we know, rolling on from that is the funding for the arrangements for the Community Connect concession funds as well. I could proceed further on that, but I just want to get an idea from the meeting as to how you feel about it, because it's critically important to have more people on our buses. Mayor Nick a minute ago mentioned students, young people, and we want to increase patronage. And I just sort of feel that we're in the midst now here in Nelson, Tasman region, in a huge modal shift, changing the way we travel around our region. And I think the timing of this alteration that was highlighted in December of 2023 by the Minister and coming into force on the 30th of April, the timing is the alterations to fares on e-bus services is unfortunate. Unfortunate to say the least. And I think government, quite frankly, central government is moving too quickly without fully appreciating why these fare concessions were introduced. Mr. Chair, I want to tell the meeting here, members, that public transport is much more than an equity issue, much more. It's a major tool in helping us grapple with a climate emergency, which we're in. Nelson City Council declared one in 2019. Grapple with a climate emergency, grapple with pollution, and of course, close to home, grapple with congestion. Now, you see, I think they've missed the point here. The funding source for these transport initiatives comes from the Climate Emergency Response Fund. That's where the funding comes from and flows from there. So I say, Mr. Chair, if we want to see our e-bus service grow and improve, and we all do, we must foster greater usage by our youth. And we were told at the December meeting, 43.3% of the patronage was coming to our e-bus via 18-year-olds and younger. And I fear that this change will impinge on our youth, our young people's newly found independence, their newly found mobility. And when you use the e-bus, you don't just pay for a fare one way. And I'm concerned about the cost, and I certainly don't want to be in any way questioned about that. Because you might pay $1, you might pay $2, you might pay $4, you might pay $6, but you've got to come back as well. So you've got to multiply that by 2 or 3 or however many times you travel and you return. So there is a cost here, and I think we must be mindful of that. And I just want to make the point. It might be a cheap point, but it does, in fact, make my heart ache. When I see an agenda here, that we're thinking of allowing pets on our buses for free. We're going to make our 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds pay the bus fare. That's what we're going to do. And here in the same agenda, we're going to say, no, you can bring your dog on for free, pet on for free. Now, look, I'm going to be a dog in the next world. I hope to be. Find a good home and a good master. But I think that in all seriousness, I would like to ask you, please, to give favourable consideration to making representations to the Minister of Transport and asking him to put a hold on his decision. It's too premature. Our service has hardly settled in. And I'd be grateful if you do that, Mr. Chair. Test the room, please.
I'm not sure how you want me to do that, Councillor Courtney.
Well, I'm thinking that Councillor O'Neill-Stevens may move it and the Mayor may second it, or you may even.
Right. We'll see.
Mr. Chairman, I can make my position quite clear. I will not be seconding it. The first thing is we need to be real here. This is not laughing matters.
I'm not laughing.
I'm not either.
Serious about it.
But let me be serious and respond to you, Councillor Courtney.
Well,
The
actually,
government-
hang on, Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
I actually had other people before.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, the member was seeking a mover and suggested my name, and I was going to indicate that I would not be moving it, and I was going to set out the reasons why.
Happy for you to do that now.
The first reason,
Briefly.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The government last year had a $10 billion deficit. The debt of this country over the last 6 years has grown from $5 billion to over $100 billion. I do and regularly make strong submissions to the government in asking for money. But equally, I'm a realist and want to be taken seriously by the government in understanding their challenges as well. The changes with respect to Community Connect are not just for our region, are for nationwide. I also have a householder of the children that are in this age group. I honestly do not think for those people between the ages of 18 all the way up to 24 are necessarily in need of the heavy subsidies that were present. In that, if you look at the Salvation Army report on where people are under most financial stress, that is not an age group that's under particular stress, particularly in those people 21 to 24. So the reasons I do not support moving the motion is I think it is unrealistic in the current government's fiscal environment. I think Emma will be stressing to us the level of stress that there is within the NZTA budget, and that when we are making submissions to government for money, we should do so in areas where we genuinely think they are the highest priority for our transport needs, and I don't think this is it. My last point is, with respect to the e-bus, we must always recognise that it is an 80% subsidised service, that on average, the user is paying 20% of the cost, and there is a very heavily ratepayer and taxpayer subsidy with it.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I support where you're coming from, Councillor Courtney, in the sense that I don't think that the climate emergency response fund should be depleted with resulting possibly in increasing our emissions. But I'm just wondering whether or not there's any data available about what happens when you actually move from a free fare to a paid fare in terms of the number of people using the bus. I mean, I would imagine that this has happened a lot around the world. And do we have a feel about how this is likely to actually affect the numbers of people using our bus service?
Through the chair, there is research. It actually works the other way, though. There was some research carried out to see what the uptake would be if you went from having a fare to going to a no fare situation. And that research suggested that it didn't increase patronage a great deal. More importantly, the reliability and the timetabling is what influences people's decision to take a bus or not. We anecdotally think a lot of the bus use that has occurred since the fares were free for under 12-year-olds or reduced might have otherwise been walked or cycled or scooted. And that's borne out by something that was relayed to the committee earlier today, first-hand experience of young people in particular riding 3 or 4 stops, a journey that they might have otherwise walked or scooted. So the research didn't support an introduction of free fares, and in fact previously Waka Kotahi's fare policy didn't either, and that's why our fares policy was written as it was, to be compliant with the Waka Kotahi policy, which was no free travel.
Councillor Hudson, do you want to? Myself, Marg, I've and Madeline, thanks for the report, and Madeline particularly, thank you for your contribution over the time you've been with us in this committee. Really do appreciate that, so thank you. So Marg, if I go back to when you first started the presentation, just in relation to the issue of full buses and having to put on second buses, what effect is that having on congestion with having to rope in a second bus? Well, what I'm meaning there is I've heard anecdotally that because of the extra buses, they're actually taking longer than they were proposed because there's more people using the roads and there's now another bus on as well.
Through the chair, I'd say the other bus on it is possibly replacing 30 car rides, so it's hopefully relieving congestion. What I will say is I mean, there's two issues here. There's capacity, which is a challenge we're facing at the moment, but I suspect is seasonal. And there's congestion, which is causing delays to our timetable. So we are looking at tweaking our timetable, and I'll be coming back to the committee on. We know that our buses are struggling in the current congested network to stick to timetable. So there's some changes to the timetable are proposed. Those will come at a cost, which I will be bringing back to this committee at the next meeting. Until we get bus priority lanes or bus priority measures, which were proposed through the Nelson Future Access Study, the bus is going to be stuck in the same traffic jam that everybody else is.
Yeah. And then secondly, just around the issue of the school children migrating to the public transport, what effect is that having on the school funded buses? Our Ministry of Education, I think they're funded free, because has been a concern expressed at the South Island Chairs about there's an option of potentially a realization that if they're doing that all the time, we may lose some school bus routes.
That's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. So this is quite complex. So there are Ministry of Education bus services that you qualify for if you live more than 4 kilometres away from the school that you need to go to, that is the closest school. If you choose to bypass that school and go to another school, then there are some commercially operated fare paying services. These are run by Nelson Coach Lines and Bromwell's locally. The effect we're having on those commercially run services is that we are putting them at risk because they are maybe no longer as financially viable as they were. Now, that could affect students that we don't service, such as those out in Hira or Nelson North. If that service is withdrawn by the commercial operator, those families have little choice if they don't qualify for a Ministry of Education bus service, and some of them don't. Where the Ministry of Education services make it complex is if we have a scheduled service running in the same direction or route to them, they will withdraw their services. But they might have 3 school bus services going, say, on that route, and we have 1. So we're never going to meet that demand. So this is where I would, in an ideal world, like the 2 ministries, the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Education, to be communicating with each other around modal shift and keeping sort of single occupancy vehicles or low occupancy vehicle trips to a minimum, using public transport instead. But ministry need to have that conversation.
So I think what you're trying to tell us, there's a real risk, particularly in rural areas, and that's probably what I'm concerned about, of potentially losing some school bus runs that are funded by Ministry of Ed.
That is a risk.
How big a risk?
Mr. Chairman, I haven't had a conversation with the Ministry of Education locally recently to assess that. I can't answer that question.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if the coordination between the Ministry of Education and its bus services and the public services that are run by ourselves in partnership with the Ministry of Education has always been an area of contention and difficulty. And if we wanted to advance a sensible reform, we should be advocating for there to be one public agency, the Ministry of Transport, responsible for both services, so that we could get far better coordination. Because the issue that's been highlighted both by yourself and by Celia is one that just keeps causing difficulties for those that are trying to plan an integrated service.
Maybe that's something we could address in a future report, Mark.
Certainly, if there was the opportunity to advocate, I would be of a view that we should be advocating to central government for a greater coordination at least, and preferably a merger of effectively Ministry of Transport taking responsibility for the delivery of the school bus transport services, so to a properly integrated would be a significant step forward nationwide.
Yeah, I agree. So just some further things from myself, just in relation to the issue that me and Nick covered in relation to the Mitre 10 junction. in time you're going to run the buses there, but you can't now because of timing issues and the complexity about entering. What's going to change that make it that you will do that going forward?
Mr. Chairman, the developer of that site would need to make sure that the infrastructure within that site could cope with not only the weight but the turning circles of the buses, and then a timetable review would need to be carried out to accommodate that. And that's not going to be easy if we want to retain an integrated service where people can come from Richmond to Nelson and then catch the route 4 bus to Artify. So there's just not a lot of fat in the system at the moment with regard to integrated timetabling. So the costs, the infrastructure, the turning circle would fall to the developer, and we have had that conversation and we will continue to advise them, but that's not in any council budget at the moment. We could look at, as the Mayor suggested earlier, putting bus stops closer to that complex, and I'm thinking Pascoe Street could be an option, that Route 2 is redirected, but this is all the sort of stuff that we will discuss and analyse when we carry out the full review of the service in August.
Right, so there'd be no change this year
other than if the committee supports the extension of the Stoke on Demand route down there between now and August.
Yeah, which I believe they possibly would. And the final question, just in relation to the pets on buses in the trial, how are you going to judge if the trial's successful or unsuccessful? Because I have some reservations about pets on buses personally.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be looking at the Auckland Transport example. So they carried out the review where they engaged with stakeholders, including passengers, operators, bus drivers, special service dog groups such as Blind Low Vision, and they gathered a lot of feedback. We can use Shape Nelson or Shape Tasman, people can provide their experiences or feedback, and then we would be bringing a report back to this committee to collate that, and a decision would be made on whether that trial is going to continue or not, which is how Auckland did it. So surveys.
I guess I certainly got no issue with the service dogs and guide dogs and the like, but if people are just really taking their pet because they can, I do have some reservations about that, particularly if we're misplaced or they're displacing other people that may well use the seat. But I understand they either have to have them on their lap or under the seat, and obviously not all dogs are going to fit under the seat.
Mr. Chair, with regard to capacity, so the terms and conditions outline that this would only be operational between, I think it's 9 and 3. We haven't got the attachment open, and at weekends, so it's not at peak times.
Thank you. You have a further question?
Yes, a couple of extra subs, Mark. On the point that Stuart raised, I'm assuming that the Auckland trial with the dogs was successful and they've now made that as a permanent measure. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the second bit was I just trying to understand, and look, I'm impressed and positive about the fact that you are adding extra overflow buses onto those busy routes where the patronage is so strong, but we're struggling with the capacity. But could you explain for me how we fund that? I love the fact that we're doing it, because we're nothing worse than turning off the consumer who wants to use the bus for it being overflowed and not. How does the funding work when we need to put an overflow bus on, and the arrangement with the contractor?
Through the chair, the funding works. Some fare is recovered, some is not. There will be a shortfall, and that is added to our operational budget, and that is why we are forecasting an overspend this year, which I'll be reporting back on March.
Thank you. And don't take those questions as I'm impressed and encouraged that even though we're not doing the formal review till August, that we're putting those overflow buses on so customers are not let down. So please keep doing it. I'm just wanting to understand the mechanism by which we are funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so just on this topic of dogs on buses, I recall that the Golden Bay Community Board did a consultation and had hearings on about dogs being able to be in certain places in Takika Main Street. And we were quite taken about having dogs around them. So some people really, really don't want to be near dogs, and they don't want their children near dogs. So I'd just like to see something a bit more definite about how we're actually going to decide on whether or not this trial is a success, and something a bit more definite about, you know, a trial does really mean that we have to have some kind of consultation, and you're speaking about Shape Tasman and that type of thing. Well, yeah, I think that's all fine, but I'd just like to see something that's a little bit more, gives a little bit more confidence that we're actually going to be listening to people's concerns about it. Just a program, an outline of how that is going to go. And my other point is just that the terms and conditions, we're changing from the word from dogs to pets, and it's a bit inconsistent through the terms and conditions. And I'm assuming that can people take a cat in a cage on a bus? They can. Yes, I think that we need to be making these terms and conditions maybe specific to dogs rather than calling them pets, because we're going to have a difference between a cat in a cage and a dog not in a cage, just to make it a little bit more consistent. Is that, yeah.
Noted, thanks.
Happy to move the floor.
Mark, do you recall, refresh my memory, do you recall the Nelson City Council having a trial with pets on buses? And how did that go?
I certainly do, Councillor Courtney, through the chair. So that's what I would describe as phase one, and it's been ongoing, where we allowed dogs, pets, I'm not quite sure what the words were, interchangeable, in containers on public transport. So that if you look at the Auckland example, they did their trial in 2 phases. Phase one was in containers, and we're doing that now. We're proposing today to extend it to phase 2, which is dogs outside of containers with a cage muzzle under certain terms and conditions, which allow them to travel at certain times of the day, not at others, with children over the age of persons over the age of 16, etc., etc. So our phase 1 of the trial started and has continued, and we're now going into phase 2.
Stevens,
Happy to move 4 resolutions
as they are shown on the screen.
as they're shown on the screen, yes.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dowler.
You have Dowler. Yeah, balance.
Any further discussion or speaking to the motion? It's up for debate now.
I'll have my go, which is just say I think there's been we've stumbled into my favourite topic for most of this discussion, which is urban economics, and specifically the economics of transport policy. So I'll get briefly passionate, which is just to say I think myself and me and Nick share a view, which is there is cost everywhere we look in the transport space. Things cost. What those costs look like are both financial, but they're also environmental and they're also social. I'm so happy to see us progressing with the introduction of an accessibility concession for total mobility card holders, which covers multiple costs. Right now, on average, we do a $6 subsidy as council per taxi ride taken. That is significantly higher than one-way bus fare. So we know that actually, if we are seeing movement from taxis towards our public transport system, in line with the Waka Kotahi guidance that scheme users should be encouraged to use public transport, then we are seeing savings. If those are new trips, then we are seeing benefits of actually people being able to access and engage in our community. On Councillor Courtney's point around changes to SURF funding and the changes to subsidies in relation particularly for those free services for under 13s. I think we will see a cost. Those trips will either not be taken or that cost will be absorbed elsewhere. Some of that may be a productive absorption of cost of young people who have time, taking the time to walk or cycle to their destination, or it might be the cost of young people stepping back and not engaging as much, or the cost of those fares hitting hard on the pockets of people already heavily affected by the cost of living crisis. When we talk about subsidy as well, we also need to make sure that we're looking at it in the wider context of our transport network and where subsidy is taking place. Yes, we subsidise public transport 80% in this region. But when we look at the total cost and total subsidy per user, and we look at the total cost of those services in terms of the efficiency gains of taking cars off the road, when we look at the environmental gains of public transport trips, suddenly that subsidy picture becomes a lot less clear. And when we talk total numbers, we'd be remiss not to also discuss the significant subsidy that as councils we also provide to every other form of transport use. And often those absolute sums are significantly higher. Now, we don't have time to get right down into the numbers, but it's just to say that there is such right debates to be had in this space to make sure that where investment is going into places that are going to maximise the accessibility of our city and equity within our public transport and within our transport network, and to make sure that our residents have choice. And I think, again, just reflecting on the continued strong response to our e-bus service has shown that there was a large cohort in our community that were needing these choices, or those who have now had whole new ways of getting around our city opened up. And with all of those trips, and especially those trips that otherwise wouldn't be taken, we will be seeing increased economic activity, increased social activity, increased social cohesion. And that's truly the beautiful thing about transport, isn't the trips themselves, but actually the destinations and what happens there. And so I think all of the moves we're taking today are going to help enhance and support that. But we do need to continue to be rigorous in our debate and fierce in our advocacy, Councillor Courtney, to make sure that our region and our people and that our public transport and our transport network is serving those who it needs to serve.
Any other speakers in the debate?
Mr. Chair,
Nesmith.
I'll just make a brief contribution. The introduction of e-buses is one of the most exciting developments in transport services, and today we're appropriately making a couple of nuances in the way in which we deliver that service, and just want to acknowledge the work that staff have done so quickly in bringing forward the mobility concession coming into effect on the 1st of May. That is actually quite significant for those 2,000 people that do have disabilities and being able to get access. I'm one of those that's quite liberal about trying to make our bus services work with people with pets. We are doing this trial for a period of 3 months with the dogs. I do think the committee needs to keep open-minded in response to how successful that is. We have got a steer that's been reasonably successful in Auckland. But a large number of our residents have a dog as a pet, want to take them to a place like Te Hunanui Beach for their regular dog run, and if they can do so using the public transport rather than the car, that is a good thing. I don't doubt there will be some critics, but I think it is a good initiative in the sense of doing a trial and seeing if we can further expand the range of transport journeys that people are able to do by public transport, and just look forward to the feedback from the public after we do that trial. We have got the substantive review to take place in August on the e-bus service. It's inevitable when we make a change of the scale that we did with that service that is going to require some adjustments as we go. those changes we're making with respect to dogs and mobility are part of that. And there are going to be some broader questions that we get to in August as to how we make this the very best service we can. So thank you to the staff for their work, and I'm supportive of the resolutions.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill Stevens, do you wish to have a right of reply? If not, it appears there's no further speakers. I'll put the resolutions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, resolution is carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next item, which is the Waka Kotahi NZTA update. Emma, in your capable hands. Welcome again.
Thanks, Chair. So a relatively short update this month. Obviously, we still are awaiting the government policy statement that will determine some of the next steps and how we proceed. So, the updates I can provide. Obviously, it remains really important that we continue to work on preparation for regional land transport planning, because once we have the GPS, we still need to work through the process of preparing for the next National Land Transport Program. And that means that obviously we need the information from every region about what their priorities are. This is a regular occurrence every 3 years that the process often coincides with an election, and we do need to be a little agile in how we plan for and manage that. So as soon as we have the GPS, obviously, I will be working with your officers, and our teams will be working together on how we then give effect to that. Another important decision that the government has made is that EVs will be subject to road user charges from the 1st of April. And the process to enable that to occur is being prepared for and rolled out, and all EV owners will be getting a notification of how to go about doing that, and they have until the 31st of May to buy a license. And that is something that we know that for many people will be a new process, and so our contact centre will be preparing to support people through that process once it goes live. And the final area, the Minister has announced that he first of all made some changes to the setting of speed limits rule in December to provide some more flexibility in terms of time limits for certain actions. And he is now working to prepare a new rule. We don't yet have a confirmed timeline for when that's available. And so we will obviously wait till we receive that. The existing rule remains in place, and so councils can still make changes where they believe that is in the best interest of their communities. And that's really the update. Just in terms of our summer maintenance program, all the chip seal program has been completed, and there's some areas of asphalt and rehab work still continuing. But we are well on track, and the team has done a fantastic job, and also had the benefit of good weather and no major storm events so far in the season. So we're very pleased about that.
Okay. To take questions.
Absolutely.
I just did notice you had no local update other than what you've just given us verbally. Are you happy to take questions about the network as well?
If there's anything, if it's deeply operational, I may not have every section at my fingertips, but I can certainly do my best.
Thank you. Mayor Smith and then Councillor Dowling.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. At our last meeting, we received the information that the road of national significance, which is particularly significant for these communities, the Hope Bypass, had a substantive, surprising increase in the budget for that project. and we sought some further information. We basically just had a number of 480, where previously the numbers were about 240 for that project. And we sought a brief to get better understanding as to why the project had increased in scale. When does Waka Kotahi NZTA think they'll be in a position to brief the Regional Transport Committee on both the background to those cost increases and also give us some sense of the agency's timetable around advancing that project given the new government's commitments?
So the major factor in that is the release of the government policy statement. Once we have the government policy statement that confirms government's expectations around any roads of national significance and the funding and timing of those, we will obviously then be in a position to provide further information. And at this stage, any project doesn't have a finalised and confirmed scope, which is a big factor in determining the final cost. So those ranges will remain broad until we confirm that scope. But
Emma, at the last meeting when this issue was raised, I thought we were quite clear and agreed that you would provide a brief to us as to the basis for that latest estimate. And we were assured we would get it. I'm assuming that is still coming.
We will be doing that once we have the GPS, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Emma, just a compliment from our road users over our way at this stage regarding the upgrade of the Ruby Bay bypass. It started. There is a question that's been raised with me and I couldn't answer, but anyway, the comments have been that if the traffic management stays as it is, everybody will be quite happy. There's minimal delays at this stage. The word out there is that the kiwi fruit and apples, and for those who've got water, it's going to be a bumper crop. So the trucks will be on the road and under tight time schedules with the port. Starting from next Monday, by the sound of it, harvest is starting Friday. So the packhouses are going to kick off on Monday. The question that I've had that I couldn't answer was the number of cones that are on the road. What is the traffic management costing? I came through this morning in a car and I went, ooh, it was cones from Africa. I mean, like at this end coming up, I would say that the cones probably stretched for 500 or 600 metres before we got to the actual roadworks. And, you know, you get people chucking it around. It's $2 a day for a cone sitting there. How much is this going to cost us compared to the actual work that's being done? You know, so I said, well, I can't answer that. But no doubt there's a traffic management budget, which the traffic management people will have to be contained within. And if they put extra cones out there and it's not a cost, well, don't get too excited about it. But, you know, but yeah, so the main thing was, yes, everybody's happy so far. Hopefully all the transport operators who carry fruit and everything will be happy. If the delays are no worse than what they are, that's their biggest fear. Once they start putting the fence up down the middle of the road, if it starts going stop-start traffic lights, or that's going to really, because they're actually starting to look at bringing in trucks from outside the area to hopefully carry the extra fruit that's going to come off the trees. Just a comment, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the cost of the TTM, I'd have to get a response from the team on that. In terms of the number of cones, one of the things that happens if you don't have enough cones, people do find it confusing and sometimes drive between them and go back on the other side of them. And, you know, obviously protecting the work site is critical. In terms of the next phase of traffic management, once installation's underway, there is likely to be more disruption, but our journey manager will be providing that advice back to the community so that we keep giving updated information about what's happening when and where. So we'll, as much as possible, keep everyone well informed in advance.
That was a comment that would, if we're going to start using the inland highway to avoid it, we need to know in advance so that we can pre-plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
My apologies. In relation to the speed management review and the setting of a new rule, as you know, we're undertaking consultation now. How long do you see the window being before we'll have a clear legislation or guidance around that and just how we do that process?
I don't have a timeline yet for when the new rule will be available. Obviously, it's quite complex and needs to be worked through with care. So the existing rule still is in place. If there was something that you felt was urgent that needed to be progressed, but otherwise, as soon as we get that clarity, we'll let you know.
Like, do you think we're looking at 6 months or beyond, within 6 months?
I couldn't say right now.
Yeah, so we may need to at some stage seek guidance of just how we address that. I'm not sure who we would seek the guidance from, but maybe yourself and others.
Yeah, a quick stop on that. But regardless, under the new law that was passed by the previous government, any speed limit changes need to be signed off by the Secretary of Transport. Is that my?
By the Director of Land.
By the Director of Land Transport. So
it's
the
the regulation.
council still does not. We do not still get the final word under the law that was changed.
Correct.
The final word rests with the director,
and possibly will under the new.
and I'm sure it will.
It's at whatever time. There are certainly some councils have gone ahead with changes that they had really strong community support for, and the director will consider those against the current rule.
And of course, there's guidelines that you've developed previously that we can't be a long way away from them anyway, for the one better wording. So thank you. And then just locally in relation to Delos Bluff and the work continuing there, I've anecdotally heard that there's possibly another 6 months work there to complete those 2 projects.
There's 2 separate things. The completion of the existing Delos Bluff works and the underslip should be largely completed now. The work now proceeds to the second component, which was the identification of further work to improve resilience. And so the timing of that is still being worked through, but that's in addition to the previous work to provide further resilience.
There's another matter, but I'll talk to you about that offline at the end of the meeting. So thank you. Any other questions? If not, do we have a recommendation in relation to the presentation? No. Normally, I think we have a resolution to accept it, whether that's required. Councillor Dowell is happy to move. Councillor O'Neill second. I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, resolution is carried. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Can't see you, Elaine. So with that, I will ask Dwayne to do the closing karakia, please.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before I get on to the karakia, just since we were talking about the speed management plan, I just thought I'd update the committee very briefly about how consultation is going. So as of this morning, I gather, Jane, we've had 1,162 submissions on the speed management plan process. So that ranks it up there in terms of the engagement process that councils have managed in the past. I think the LTP might generate a similar number, but that's across the entire business of council. So getting over 1,000 is, I'm viewing that as a success. Only 47 so far have listed to be heard, but that may change, and roughly 50-50 from the urban and rural communities. So really good great engagement across our different communities. And the only other thing I thought I'd mention is, reading Simeon Brown's public releases around the speed management plan guidelines that he wants to introduce. One of the things that he wanted to be sure of is that councils engage their communities really well. So it in fact reflected the views of the community, and I think we could probably say that at least in terms of the process we've run so far, it ticks that box. The other one, though, was making sure that speed limit changes consider the economic consequences of the changes. So we are just getting some further work done. We did provide some information to the committee earlier on, but I guess our feeling is the government wants to have quite a high bar, make sure it's a really robust economic assessment. So we're just checking with some potential providers who can provide us a better analysis than the one we've provided today, so that we've anticipated that requirement, and we can show that we've tried to meet it, and we'll provide you good information for your deliberations.
Yeah, it's the submissions closed 29th of February, and there will be quite a period of collating all of that information before we come to the commission hearings.
Correct. The hearings are scheduled for the 20th of March. I can't actually remember when the deliberations are scheduled.
Yeah, that'd be pretty accurate.
Oh, sorry, I just looked at my calendar before. Apologies. Thank you, Jay.
Is the intention for the full Regional Transport Committee to hear the submissions, or to have a subcommittee given the large number?
Through the chair, no, the Regional Transport Committee is the hearings committee, and it will be making recommendations to the joint councils. It's ultimately the joint councils that will make the final decision and to recommend it to the Director of Transport.
Yeah, when do we get this opportunity to read the submissions, please?
Oh, actually, that's a good point. We can probably start batching out the submissions to you now. Thank you for raising it. Kia hika te korero, let the discussions be lifted. Kia wātia, kia mama, te manawa o te tangata, clear away the ease in the hearts of people. Kia te aro mō tātou e ora nei, peace is upheld, ko rongo, ki ronga, say yes, kia tina, bind us together, and so it is, hui e tai kia.